You think you know your family until the day it becomes your prison. My name is Isadora, and for 15 years my world was confined to four walls, locked windows, and a door that never opened. It wasn't just a house. It was a sealed box, where the air felt thin and every echo reminded me of the limited space. The smell of mold and old books mingled with a sense of stagnation that I couldn't name, but which slowly suffocated me. The faded wallpaper, the heavy furniture that seemed to shrink the room, and the constant dim light from the few lamps created a dreamlike or nightmare-like atmosphere that I had never openly questioned. I grew up believing that the world outside was a dangerous abyss, that shadows lurked around every corner, waiting for any opening to destroy us. Mom would say this with wide eyes, while my father, with his heavy silence and distant gaze, would simply nod, confirming the invisible threat. And my family? Well, they said they did it all for love. A suffocating love, which enveloped me like a shroud. It's for your own good, Issa. The world isn't what you imagine. That was my mother's favorite phrase. She would whisper it as she locked the front door, turned 3 keys, and hid the bunch in a built-in wall safe. The metallic click of the keys, the dry thud of the safe. Each of these sounds etched itself into my memory like the bells of a cell. My father rarely spoke. He was a tall, rigid man with a posture that seemed to carry the weight of an ancient secret. His eyes, always opaque, seemed to hide a storm that never broke, only resonated within. He was a wall, as impenetrable as the ones that surrounded us, and my brother Davy, well, he was the only crack in that captivity, the only thing that made the prison seem bearable. When we were together, he was my window to a world I didn't know. We played with the scraps of freedom we had left, assembling old jigsaw puzzles with missing pieces, their edges worn by time and colors faded, but which still gave us the illusion of building something new. Listening to old songs on a static-filled radio, tunes that spoke of love and horizons I had never seen, and which I tried to decipher, imagining what those places might be like. Or even inventing stories about what lay beyond our backyards. Mossy fence, tales of giant forests, rushing rivers, illuminated cities, free people who could come and go. In those moments, for a second, the world was bigger than that moldy ceiling sheltering us, than the wooden floor that creaked beneath our feet. My routine was a monotonous cycle. Waking up to the same analog clock marking the hours, eating the same bland meals at the dark wooden table, reading the few repeated books we had, their pages already worn, watching the dust dance in the rays of light that barely filtered through the foggy windows. I drew imaginary worlds on loose sheets from old notebooks, characters who traveled, who explored jungles and oceans. I dreamed of the smell of rain on asphalt, of the touch of wind on my face without the barrier of a screen, of the murmur of unknown voices. My curiosity was a slow but constant fire burning beneath the ashes of imposed normality. But as the years passed, questions began to surface. They were small seeds of doubt, planted by the silence, by the excessive control, by what I felt was missing. Why did no one else visit me? My grandmother, my uncles. They were just names in old stories, faces in faded photographs. I had no living memories of them. Why could I never go to school like the other children I saw in cartoons? I imagined the noise of the hallways, the smell of crayons and chalk, the joy of learning with other voices, of making real friends. And why, for heaven's sake, were all the windows screwed shut from the inside? Not just locked, they were sealed, with the wood around them cracked by time and the absence of natural light. As if the air outside was pure poison, as if the sun could burn my skin. Childhood, with its capacity to accept the inexplicable, began to give way to unease. For your own good no longer sounded like protection, but like an empty excuse, a phrase, meant to silence my questions, to quell the curiosity simmering within me. One day, unease turned into urgency. I approached the front door, the one that never opened, and felt the weight of the cold wood beneath my palm. Mom, why can't I ever go outside? She didn't answer immediately. Her body tensed. Then she slowly turned and hugged me tight, so tight my bones creaked. But I swear, in that embrace, I felt fear. Not my own, not that childish fear of monsters outside. It was hers. A visceral, almost palpable fear that trembled in her shoulders and seeped into me. It was then that I realized something was very, very wrong. That hug wasn't one of love, but of panic and desperation, and that distrust turned into an obsession. My world narrowed to observing. Every movement, every muffled whisper between them, as if they were poisonous secrets murmured to the wind. Each time my father's gaze met mine and he quickly looked away, or when my mother compulsively cleaned the same invisible stain on the table, I felt the tension growing. Davy stopped talking to me for a while. He avoided eye contact, as if my eyes could read the truth he held. His usual cheerfulness turned into a silent melancholy, his smiles into sighs, as if he knew something terrible that I couldn't know, and that weighed on his soul, until, on a stormy night, the power went out. Thunder rumbled outside, and lightning flashed through the dark room in intermittent bursts, revealing and hiding the dread on my parents' faces. And with it, the mask my family had worn for so long also fell. It was that day I saw the door unlocked for the first time. It was ajar. A sliver of light or perhaps darkness peeked from the hallway. The wind made the hallway howl and the rain beat furiously against the windows. The sound of the house seemed to be crumbling. My heart pounded, beating hard in my chest like a war drum. Every part of my body screamed for me to run, to flee, to escape that place where freedom was just an invented memory. The smell of dampness from outside mixed with the musty smell of the house both attracted and repelled me, but something told me if I crossed that door, there would be no turning back. My life would be irrevocably altered. And perhaps I would discover that the real danger wasn't out there, in the shadows of my mother's stories. It was in those who raised me, in the heart of my own family. I hesitated. The half-open door seemed more like a trap than a real chance at freedom. I approached slowly, almost holding my breath, every muscle tense. The wooden floor creaked beneath my bare feet, as if it too had been forbidden to move for all those years, and now protested against every step. I put my hand on the doorknob. It was cold, heavy, and for a moment I closed my eyes and imagined, what would the world outside smell like? The scent of wet earth, of plants, of clean air? The sound of unfamiliar people, of cars passing, of laughter that wasn't ours? The feeling of wind on my face without bars, without walls, without surveillance? The freedom to breathe deeply, to feel the sun on my skin, but before I could even push the door, "Isadora!" My father's voice echoed like thunder in the middle of the night, drowning out the storm. He was there, standing at the end of the hallway, an imposing silhouette against the dark background of the house. His eyes, always silent, now burned with rage, but also with a desperation I had never seen. "Go back to your room." He didn't shout. He didn't need to. That tone, dry, cold, non-negotiable, paralyzed me. My courage crumbled to dust. I went back to my room with trembling legs and a shattered soul. The door closed with a click that echoed in my chest. That night, I didn't sleep. The image of the half-open door replayed in my mind, a promise of freedom that dissolved into smoke. I sat on the edge of the bed, huddled in the blanket, staring at the dark wall, repeating a single phrase in my head like a desperate mantra. Why? Why are they doing this to me? What did I do? And then for the first time, I allowed myself to do something forbidden, something I knew could be costly, but which was my only way to resist. I wrote. I took an old notebook, with a hardcover and yellowed pages, hidden behind some old books I had read dozens of times, and began to write down everything I felt. The doubts, the fears, the silent rage, everything I remembered. Everything that didn't make sense. I wrote down the day I saw my mother burn an entire envelope in the fireplace, the flames devouring the paper, without explaining anything, only with a look of panic. The day my brother accidentally called me guilty, in a muffled whisper that I would never forget. And most importantly, the days when my name was whispered with sorrow. as if I were a living reminder of what they wanted to forget, a ghost that haunted them. The next morning, something had changed. The air in the house was thicker, and the silence seemed charged. My brother appeared at my bedroom door, his eyes red, but not from crying. They looked tired, worn down by guilt, by the pain of a secret that suffocated him. His posture was hunched, as if he carried a heavy burden. "Meet me in the basement tonight," he said, his voice low, almost inaudible. "But don't tell anyone, it's important." I had never been down to the basement. It was locked with 2 padlocks, and my parents said it was dangerous, that it had old things, loose wires, mold, that I could get hurt. A forbidden area, sealed like a tomb. But that night, when the rest of the house slept, immersed in a heavy, mysterious silence, there I was, descending the cold concrete stairs, smelling rotten wood and muffled memories that seemed to emanate from the walls. Each step echoed in the darkness. Davy was waiting, for me with a flashlight in his hand, the light flickering, and a crumpled envelope. His face was pale in the dim light. "It's time for you to know the truth," he whispered, and his choked voice sent a shiver down my spine. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Inside, there was only one thing: a birth certificate. But it wasn't mine. It was another child's, with my name. I'm not who I think I am. That question exploded in my mind as everything around me spun. The basement seemed to shrink. And for the first time, I realized the reason I was trapped in that house. It wasn't about protecting me. It was about hiding me. The paper in my hands seemed to tremble on its own, as if the truth contained within it was alive. My name, Isadora, was there, printed. But the birth date was different. 2 years before mine. And the strangest thing, the last name wasn't the same as my family's. The one I always thought was mine. "Who is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but it came out as a fragile whisper. Davy hesitated. He looked at the floor as if he was about to confess a terrible crime. His shoulders slumped. "Isadora. She came. Before you." "What?" "You are the second." That dark basement seemed to spin around me, the concrete walls closing in. I stepped back, tripped over an old box filled with indistinguishable objects, and almost fell. "Stop joking with me, Davy. This is serious. This is not the time for jokes." "I'm serious. I didn't want you to find out like this." "But they would never tell you. I can't keep this secret anymore. I couldn't breathe properly. What did he mean, the second? What kind of nightmare was this?" My brother then opened an old dark wooden box with rusty chains around it and took out an old dusty photo album. On the cover, the same name was handwritten in childish script, Isadora. When I opened it, I saw the face of a girl who looked very much like me. The same brown hair color, the same eye shape, the same smile. But it wasn't me. There was something in her eyes, a vibrancy I didn't recognize. The photos were old, yellowed by time. In some, she appeared with a rag doll that my mother said was mine when I was little, with the same wool hair and floral dress. In others, next to my father, smiling, truly smiling, an open, light smile, which he never gave me, a smile I didn't know. Davy turned the page, and then stopped. There, taped with yellowed tape, was a photo of the first Isadora, in the lap of a man I had never seen. A man with a beard, a loving smile, and eyes that seemed to convey a kindness my father never displayed. "This is her real father," my brother said, his voice almost inaudible. "They separated because of her. The first Isadora, she disappeared, and no one knows how, or where she is." The shock made me step back again, my back hitting the cold wall. I was breathless. And me? Who am I then?" "You appeared later. You were registered with the same name. They gave you the same clothes, the same toys. They tried to create a copy of her." My stomach churned. A wave of nausea hit me. Was I a copy? A farce? They had made me live another child's life. A child who vanished without a trace. They hid you so no one would suspect, because they thought if someone found out what happened to the first one, they would suspect the whole family. Our family. But what happened to her, Davy? I cried, no longer able to pretend to be calm, my voice choked with tears that had begun to stream down my face. I don't know. I only know that. Ever since she disappeared, our mother was never the same. She shut herself off, and Dad became obsessed with protecting us. I climbed the basement stairs as if fleeing a fire, the birth certificate and photo album clutched in my hands. Each step felt like a distorted memory. Every corner of the house, which I once thought was my home, my sanctuary, now seemed like the set of a grand macabre play, a cruel performance. In my room, I sat on the floor, my back against the cold wall, and tried to understand the whirlwind of information. Who am I, after all? My name was a lie, my life a sham. What happened to the girl who lived before me? Did she just disappear? And why did they make me live her life, erase the traces of her existence to fit me into this role? But there was an even more urgent, more terrifying question, one that gnawed at me from within. If someone found out what happened to the first Isadora, do I face the same risk she did? Could the darkness that swallowed her also swallow me? Little did I know that the answer was closer than I imagined, and that the next person to disappear could be me. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat wrapped in a blanket, staring at the wall as if it hid an even darker truth. The photo of that other Isadora wouldn't leave my mind. Her smiling eyes, her innocence, her rag doll. The same name, the same face, the same doll. But she had disappeared. And now, it was as if I had been used to take her place, like a living shadow, a substitution, a farce lived in a cycle of repetition. The next morning, I forced myself to act normally. My mother was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of tasteless soup, the same smell of unseasoned vegetables I knew so well. The radio played an 80s song, a sad melody that contrasted with the house's atmosphere, and the sun peered through a crack in the window that they never unlocked. "Good morning, Mom," I said, trying to sound firm, trying to control the voice that stubbornly trembled. She looked at me and smiled, a rehearsed smile, barely reaching her lips but not her eyes. Her eyes were empty, distant. "Did you sleep well, dear?" "I dreamed of Isadora." The spoon stopped mid-stir. The silence became unbearable. She slowly turned her head, her expression frozen, a chilling fear rising in her eyes. "Which Isadora?" "The first one. The one in the photos. The one you and Dad tried to hide from me." The silence that followed lasted seconds, but it felt like an eternity, filled only by the static of the radio and the soft bubbling of the soup. She then went back to stirring the soup as if nothing had happened, her hand trembling slightly. "Nonsense. That's just your imagination. You're dreaming too much." "It's not. I saw the photos. I saw the certificate. Davy showed me everything. I'm not blind." She dropped the spoon with such force that the sound echoed through the kitchen, a dull thud that broke the silence. The spoon fell into the pot, splashing soup. "He shouldn't have done that," she whispered, her voice trembling, the voice of a scared child. "Why did you hide me? Why did you make me live in her place? I'm not her." "Because I couldn't bear to lose her again," she cried, and tears welled up in her eyes, streaming down her pale cheeks. Her control broke, and her pain overflowed. "You don't understand." She disappeared, from one day to the next, as if she had evaporated. No one ever found her. The police searched, but found nothing. She collapsed into the chair, her shoulders shaking, her face hidden in her hands. "Your father collapsed. I thought I would go crazy from grief. And then you appeared. On the doorstep of a hospital. A note with the same name, Isadora, the same name as my lost daughter. I thought, maybe it was a sign, a second chance, a blessing in disguise." I approached, anger mixed with a pang of pity. "So you decided to raise me as her? To trap me here? To stop me from living a real life? To make me a substitute? She didn't answer. She just cried, her sobs echoing through the kitchen, each one a stab in my heart. Suddenly, the front door burst open violently, slamming against the wall. My father entered, breathless, his face contorted. His eyes swept the scene, stopping. On me, then on my sobbing mother. "What did you tell her?" he asked, his voice low but laden with suppressed fury, staring at my mother. "She has a right to know," she replied, her voice weak, but with a new firmness that surprised me. But he didn't agree. I saw it in his eyes. It wasn't fear. It was desperation, a primal panic. "You don't understand what's at stake, girl. This family survived because it hid what it needed to hide. You can't just go out and tell the world everything. The police. But I'm not her." I cried, feeling frustration and rage overflowing. "But the world doesn't know that," he replied, his voice cutting like a blade. "And if they find out that we made you live the life of a missing child, if they discover the deception, we'll lose everything, the whole family." He didn't need to finish the sentence. I understood. This wasn't just about love. It wasn't just about protection or grief. It was about guilt, about shame, about desperation, fear, and most importantly, survival. The survival of a lie. They hid me, not just because they lost someone they loved, but because they were hiding something much bigger, something that could destroy their reputation, their lives. And that night, as the house was immersed in a heavy silence and the smell of incense my mother burned to mask the mold spread, I began to search through my drawers for any clue, anything that would give me more answers. Behind a built-in closet, hidden by a pile of old clothes, I found something strange. A diary, with a worn leather cover and a rusty golden clasp, with the first Isadora's name engraved on the cover. The pages were yellowed, thin as tissue paper, with finger marks and some stains that looked like old tears, faded by time. The name Isadora F. was written on the first page, in childish but firm handwriting, dated years before my own birth. It was hers, the girl I replaced, the girl who seemed to haunt me. I took a deep breath, smelling the aged paper, sat on the floor and began to read, each word a revelation. "Today," Mom cried again. She always cries when she looks at me, as if I'm not enough. I wanted to understand why. She hugs me tight, but her hug squeezes me. It doesn't comfort me. The first pages seemed innocent. Accounts of a girl trying to please her parents, describing her days inside a house, which was exactly the same one I lived in. The same withered garden, the same kitchen, the same bedroom. I was grounded because I asked about school. Dad said it's safer here, that no one can know where we are, that the outside world is dangerous, and that's why the windows don't open. My stomach churned. She was also kept prisoner. She also heard the same lies. With each line, the diary revealed a more painful truth. She was also isolated, also fed lies. And the cruelest part, she also suspected something was wrong. She was as curious as I was, but her questions were silenced. "There's a door in the basement they never let me open. Sometimes I hear noises in there, like someone is crying, a muffled voice that frightens me." My heart pounded. A door in the basement? I had never seen that. The basement was large, full of boxes, but I had never noticed a door beyond the main entrance. I kept reading, devouring every word as if my very life depended on it, as if each sentence could set me free. And then, near the end, I found something that chilled my entire body. The ink almost faded by tears. "Today, I discovered what's behind the door. And now I know why they lock me in here. I know why I can't leave. But I won't write it down. If anyone finds this, please, don't tell anyone. It's dangerous. It's more dangerous than the outside world." The next page was torn out, abruptly, as if someone had ripped it out in a hurry, desperate to erase the truth. I stood still, staring at the blankness of the torn page. Part of me wanted to obey what was written there, not to go behind the door, to pretend I knew nothing. But another, part bigger, stronger, more desperate, more rebellious, Knew I needed to know. I couldn't live in a play anymore, be a character in a script written by others. I needed my own truth. In the dead of that night, I waited for everyone to sleep. The silence of the house was heavy, only the ticking of the clock and the sound of my own breathing. I took the flashlight, took a deep breath, and descended into the basement again. But this time, I didn't stop at the stairs. I looked at the walls more closely. The smell of damp earth and mold was stronger. Behind some old shelves filled with junk and dusty cloths hidden by old boxes and a pushed-aside cabinet, there was an iron door, heavy, covered by a dusty sheet, almost invisible in the darkness. Thick padlock, rusty chain, and silence. A silence so heavy it seemed to scream, a silence that crushed. I used a rusty crowbar I found among my father's tools, hidden in a corner. The cold metal in my hand, force, rage, fear, and adrenaline. Pulsing through my veins, I hit the padlock hard, and then, clang! The padlock broke, falling to the concrete floor with a shrill sound that made me jump. I pushed the door open with trembling hands, the old wood groaning in protest, and what I saw inside was not what I expected. It wasn't a storage room or a tunnel. It was a small room, cold, with padded walls, gray and dirty, like those of an old psychiatric hospital. The smell of disinfectant mixed with something metallic hit me. In the corner, a chair bolted to the floor, with leather straps on its arms, stained by time. On the ceiling, a faint bulb that flickered intermittently, creating dancing shadows. That intensified the horror. And on the walls, dozens of children's drawings. Drawings made with crayons, some with dried blood, others with paint. Drawings of a girl, behind bars, children crying, frightened faces. In one of them, the most shocking, there was a phrase written in crooked letters in the handwriting of the first Isadora. "She is not who you think she is." In that moment, I knew. The first Isadora hadn't disappeared by accident. She hadn't vanished. She was locked away. And perhaps she had tried to escape the same truth that now surrounded me on all sides. The same prison I was living in. That room in the basement seemed like a labyrinth of old secrets, where every shadow hid a piece of the truth my family tried to bury. I didn't know if I felt fear or relief to finally be discovering something real, something concrete, even if it was terrible. I picked up one of the drawings and read the phrase again, feeling a chill down my spine. She is not who you think. She is. Who would she be then? And why was my family so afraid of that truth? What was behind that phrase? In the middle of the room, under the faint light of the bulb, I found a small wooden chest, dark and heavy. It was locked, but the padlock was old, rusty, easy to open. Inside, there were documents, photos, and letters yellowed by time, papers with strange handwriting. One of the letters was addressed to a doctor and spoke of a girl named Isadora, who suffered from a rare condition, a mental illness, a disease that could affect her mind and behavior uncontrollably. The tone of the letter was serious, professional, but filled with deep sadness and fear. She needs constant treatment and must be kept away from the world for her safety and that of others. Her behavior is unpredictable. Was that the justification for the confinement? Not an external danger, but the child herself? My eyes were drawn to an old photograph, where a curly-haired girl with large, frightened eyes lay on a hospital bed, her face marked by pain and confusion. She held the hand of a woman who seemed to be my mother, but with a different, more worried, more exhausted look, a look I had never seen. Then I understood. The first Isadora had not disappeared. She was locked there because no one knew how to deal with her illness. Because it was a shame, a heavy burden. And me? I was the substitute, the normal child they created to try to erase that pain, that shame, that absence. I was the comfort of a ruined family. As I leafed through the papers, smelling of time and tragedy, I heard footsteps, slow, hesitant footsteps. Davy was at the door, looking at me with tear-filled eyes, his face pale and tired. "I wanted to protect you from this truth," he said, his voice choked, a whisper of pain. "But the truth is heavier than any lie. and it was eating you from the inside, Isadora. I wanted to run, scream, cry. But the only thing that came out was a whisper, my voice hoarse. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you let me live this lie? He took a deep breath, his shoulders shaking with a suppressed sob. Because the world isn't ready to understand. Because our family was trying to survive. Trying to hide the illness, the shame, the failure. That moment changed everything. My ground opened up and the identity I knew crumbled. I knew my freedom was far from won, but now I had something I never had. Answers. Cruel answers, but real ones. And an immense desire to rebuild my story, my way. Not the story of the first Isadora, but my own. With the weight of the truth finally revealed, a new reality began to unfold before my eyes. I was no longer the child locked in that house. I was no longer just a swapped face, a hidden story, a living ghost. I was someone with a right to freedom, to choices, to my own identity, even if it was still forming. But leaving that invisible prison wouldn't be easy. The house wasn't made of bars, but of secrets and fears that trapped me. That same night, I sat with Davy in my room, the door locked, to plan what we would do. The flashlight illuminated our frightened faces. He knew the risks. What could happen if our parents found out I knew too much, that I wanted to leave, that I would no longer accept being the substitute. But he also knew that I couldn't live that lie anymore. His eyes pleaded with me to be strong. We need to act carefully. If they realize we're united against them, it could be worse for us, he warned me, his voice grave. They're desperate to keep everything a secret. But staying here is suffocating, Davy. I need to see the outside world. I need to understand who I really am. I need to live my own life, not hers. Our plans were simple, but risky. Seek help. Find a lawyer, someone who could protect us and guarantee our safety, who would give us a chance at freedom. But that meant breaking down the walls my family had built over decades and facing a world I had never known, a world my parents said was dangerous, but which now seemed my only hope. The next morning, when I met my mother in the kitchen, I tried to talk to her again. Mom, I need to leave. I need to live. I need to know who I am outside of here. She looked at me with tired eyes, speechless, just a silence that said everything, that said, I can't. And there I understood that the battle would be much bigger than I imagined. It wasn't just an escape, it was a legal, emotional struggle against the distorted love that held me captive. In the following days, I began to meticulously document everything, every conversation, every look, every moment of silence, every veiled threat. The first Isadora's diary, the documents, the photos. It was my proof, my security, my shield. Because I knew my fight wasn't just for me. It was for all the children who had been silenced, locked away, forgotten. I would be the voice of the first Isadora, and of all the others who didn't get a chance to scream. Days passed with increasing tension inside that silent house. Davy and I communicated secretly, exchanging knowing glances and secret plans in the basement. The fear of being discovered was constant, a knot in my stomach. Until one afternoon, as I was organizing some papers in my room, I felt the change in the house's air. My father's voice in the living room. It was a different voice, cold, authoritative, reverberating through the walls. They had found out the diary, the basement door, the truth Davy and I had unearthed. My heart pounded, and every second seemed to last an eternity. My breath caught in my throat. He entered the room with firm, determined steps, his eyes fixed on me. Isadora, we need to talk. I slowly stood up, trying to hide the panic that overwhelmed me, trying to maintain my posture. You shouldn't be reading that. Or meddling where you shouldn't. That's dangerous. I needed to know the truth, I replied, my voice firm, though I was trembling inside, a tremor I felt in my knees. The truth can destroy everything we've built, our family, our lives. You don't understand. Or it can set free, I said, and the phrase echoed between us, a challenge. My father looked at me, a mixture of anger and sadness in his eyes. His lips trembled slightly. "You don't understand what's at stake, child. This family survived because it hid what it needed to hide. You can't just go out and tell the world everything. The police." "But I'm not her," I cried, feeling frustration and rage overflowing. "But the world doesn't know that," he replied, his voice cutting like a blade. "And if they find out that we made you live the life of a missing child, if they discover the deception, we'll lose everything, the whole family." He didn't need to finish the sentence. I understood. This wasn't just about love. It wasn't just about protection or grief. It was about guilt, about shame, about desperation, fear, and most importantly, survival. The survival of a lie. They hid me. Not just because they lost someone they loved, but because they were hiding something much bigger, something that could destroy their reputation, their lives. After that confrontation, something inside me changed forever. The phoenix of my will rose from the ashes of that conversation. The desire to escape, to discover the world, to be who I truly was, burned like a fire that nothing could extinguish. But I knew I needed a plan, and not just courage. I needed support. Davy and I began to seek help outside the house. Through secret phone conversations, whispered in the darkness of the basement, and hidden messages and old codes that only we understood, we managed to contact a lawyer specializing in guardianship and human rights cases. Her name was Dr. Helena, and her voice on the phone was strong and confident. She immediately understood the gravity of the situation, the complexity of the deception I was living in, and promised she would do everything to help me. But she also warned, "It will be a long and difficult process, Isadora. They will try to block your every step. They will fight to keep you there. You need to be prepared to fight with all your strength." I was ready. Her every word only increased my determination. In the following weeks, I organized everything I had: the evidence, the photos of the first Isadora, the diary with the last entries, and even Davy, who offered to be a witness and confirm the isolation. I experienced the lie I was. Every day, my confidence grew. I was no longer a girl trapped in a dark house. I was a woman determined to rebuild her story, to unearth her true identity. And best of all, with support. I was no longer alone. One night, looking out my bedroom window, which now seemed smaller, more suffocating, I felt the smell of freedom, for the first time. A smell of fresh rain, wet earth, clean air, the smell of hope. The outside world was waiting for me, and I was ready to face it, on my own terms, with my own story. The legal process was a whirlwind of emotions, courtroom, battles and small victories that gave me breathing room. It wasn't easy to face my family in court, to expose such painful secrets, to see the pain in my mother's eyes, the fury in my father's gaze. It wasn't easy to face the judgments of those who didn't know the truth behind that perfect facade. But every day I stood firm. Every time I told my story out loud was a step towards my freedom, towards my own voice. Finally, after months of hearings, testimonies, tears, and much struggle, a judge ruled in my favor. The decision was clear. I could leave that house. I could live my life. My life. That day, as I closed the door to the past behind me, I felt a mix of relief and fear of the unknown. The house seemed to shrink behind me, a shadow of what was once my prison. But fear no longer paralyzed me. It transformed into fuel. I learned that freedom is not just leaving a place, but also finding the strength to be who you truly are, to write your own story, even if it starts from scratch. Today, I look back and feel no resentment, only understanding. My family tried to protect me in a twisted, desperate way based on fear and guilt. They were prisoners of their own traumas. But I chose to be free. I chose to write my own story with my own words. And that story is just beginning.